This is King World News. I'm Eric King, and you're about to hear from Gerald Celente, the top trends forecaster in the world. Gerald gives King World News listeners a sneak peek into what he expects for 2010. Remember to go to our homepage at www.kingworldnews.com for more interviews, where this week we have Jim Rickards. Mr. Rickards has been a direct participant in many of the most significant financial events over the past 30 years, including the 1981 release of U.S. hostages in Iran, the 1987 stock market crash, the 1990 collapse of Drexel, and the long-term capital management financial crisis of 1998, in which Mr. Rickards was the principal negotiator of the government-sponsored rescue. And where I will have a segment discussing the markets and where I see us headed in 2010 and in the future. We also have a GATA roundtable as well as our exclusive metals wrap with Ted Butler. Joining us now is Gerald Celente, founder and director of the Trends Research Institute, author of Trends 2000 and Trends Tracking, and publisher of the Trends Journal. He has been forecasting trends since 1980 and recently called the collapse of 2009. Gerald, you were predicting the crash of 2010. We'll start with that, but you have a bunch of predictions I wanted to cover in the interview about 2010 and where we're headed. Can we start with the crash you expect?
Sure. We call the collapse of 2009, and it collapsed. It collapsed in March, and the equity markets around the world just unraveled. What happened since then? Well, the government, the U.S. government, has either lent, spent, or guaranteed over $11 trillion to bail out the big guys. And this is a global bailout, by the way. We know they keep talking about China this and China that. How about China with stimulus and China dumping trillions into their system over the last 11 months in easy lending policies to keep this thing afloat over there? And then go around the globe. It's from South Korea to Japan, from the UK to Australia. Government after government has been dumping trillions into the system, loaning money to banks, taking worthless collateral to secure the debt, and just trying to keep this whole thing afloat. We believe that in 2010 that the stimulus will wear off. There won't be any end game to play anymore. You can't keep printing phantom money out of thin air. And the crash is going to happen, unless, of course, they come up with another scheme undreamed of. Because, after all, who would have ever thought that America would have devolved into this, where they put the people generation after generation into debt to bail out a few favored friends?
Let me ask you, Gerald, because you and I both agree we're in a depression here, and they're trying now to make it sound like we are coming out of a recession, right, magically. And you talk about this money printing and the effect of the money printing wearing off. Can you just talk about that a little bit more? Because we really didn't get anywhere with that money printing. That was really all just sort of the initial theft or looting of the country by the bankers, correct?
It is. It's the biggest, we say, it's the biggest bank robbery in American history, but the banks are doing the robbing. Let me just go through the facts. Overnight in 2008, they turned Goldman Sachs, that venerable investment bank, now how about casinos that gambled and lost, into a bank holding company. Why? Well, so they could borrow at ridiculously low rates, and they could be given approximately $10 billion to put them on the road of gambling. And then what happened? It's not that they're a bank. You go to a Goldman Sachs ATM machine? Do you have Goldman Sachs checks? Do you go to your Goldman Sachs branch? It's highway robbery right in front of us. They're nothing more than a hedge fund, and they're making money off the sweat of the American people. So when we're looking at this time and time again, we're just looking at all of this printed money going absolutely nowhere other than into the pockets of a few. And as you pointed out, it did nothing really to resuscitate the economy. How did the economy grow? Let's look at the facts. Remember cash for clunkers? Remember the tax credits that they've given for first-time home buyers that they're now extending into April of this year? Before they announced that it was going to happen, that they were going to extend it, those that were going to buy houses or planned on them rushed into the program so they could get their piece of it, fearing that it wouldn't happen again. And now we saw what the result. Now we're seeing housing starts way off. We're seeing new mortgage applications way down. We're seeing a revision of what they're saying that we got out of the recession. I loved it. Third quarter GDP growth, 3.5%. Well, let's readjust that a little bit. How about 2.8%? Now I have a better idea. Let's wait a little longer and lower it to 2.2%. And they keep doing this over and over again. They either cook the books, hide the numbers, fudge them, fix them, but the people don't know what's going on. It's like boiling that frog in the frying pan, as they used to say, turning up the heat a little bit at a time so the frog doesn't know it's being boiled to death. And that's what's going on, and that's why we believe that in 2010, you'll find out that the frog is dead. The economy's failed. The system has crashed.
I want to go over, obviously, your predictions for 2010, but first I just have a few more questions for you. And Congressman Paul said this recently on the show, right? He said when you have this money printing, it's those who get it first, right, Gerald, that it's the biggest bang for. They get the biggest bang for their buck, such as the military-industrial complex he mentioned. Now we're being told we have Fannie and Freddie getting unlimited support over the next 3 years. What was your take when you saw that, Gerald?
Well, highly expected. Look at the time they did it. Christmas Eve when nobody was watching. And what else did they do? They also told us that we're into Fannie and Freddie for about $400 billion. $400 billion. They also, what didn't make the news was they gave the brilliant, the greatest minds we have to find to run these companies a $6 million contract to do it. Again, this is high with these guys. Who's worth this kind of money to get a job doing this, to take our money and spend it the way they please? So, and then there's HR 4173 that most people aren't familiar with. There's guaranteed the too big to fails, $4 trillion as they begin to fail in 2010. So these are all the things that are giving the money to the people that need it the least, that want it the most. Look what's going on. 3 companies, J.P. Morgan Chase, Morgan Stanley, Goldman Sachs, splitting up $50 billion with a B dollars worth of bonuses and executive compensation for their great, great work. And I love it. They always say, we have to get the brightest and the best minds so that we can really run these companies the way they should be. Yeah, they have the best criminal minds that money could buy, and that's all they're doing. Nobody was worth that kind of money. The only way you make that kind of money is by doing deals, and usually these are dirty deals, and they are dirty deals. We learned about the Goldman Sachs deal, what they call it. I love the names, and again, only the best and the brightest could come up with these names. Eric, I think you should invest in a synthetic collateralized debt obligation. Well, what are those? Oh, don't worry what they are. You're going to get a great return. Sign up here. Oh, okay, I trust you. You sign up there. No sooner is the ink dry on that signature, I start shorting the synthetic collateralized debt obligation. Yeah, that's what Goldman Sachs is doing and has done. It would be like you buying an insurance policy from me and me blowing your brains out and collecting on it.
Well, these criminal banking syndicates make out like bandits, Gerald. Let's talk about what's happening in the real world for the rest of the American public, or a good portion of them. We've talked about the tent cities in the past, that expanding tent cities. Now we have the article titled Living on Food Stamps that just came out, reporting that these are staggering numbers, Gerald, and that's why I wanted you to address these. 1 in 8 Americans, so that's 12.5%, now receiving food stamps, including 1 in 4 children, 25% of the children. Can you just talk about that for a minute?
America's gone from the greatest entrepreneurial empire, from the country that was the envy of the world, the most egalitarian nation on earth, to now whereby the gap between the rich and the poor is the widest in the United States than any industrialized nations. So we're seeing the implications right in front of us. 25% of the children on food stamps. And you look at the numbers of people dropouts in major cities. You're lucky if half the kids are getting high school diplomas. You go down the list. It's one after another. All the areas where we used to be number one, according to OECD data, Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development,